You are listening to part 98 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Wade at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. Those were some pretty interesting books, weren't they?
They are, yes.
Yeah. And not books that most people know about.
No, I hadn't heard of them either.
Yeah. All right, then. Let's put, as my dad would say, let's put some rubber on the road. I want to take this opportunity to read to you. Those of you who have followed my e-zine will have already read all of this. This is a 7-part article that I wrote about what happened when I was in Costa Rica and fell and hurt my wrist. Ready to go?
Yes.
It hurt so much I thought I would faint, or maybe throw up, or maybe mess my pants. No, I didn't think. No thought was possible. My world narrowed down to my wrist, which was rapidly swelling and looked grossly distorted and hurt. It hurt too much to cry. I willed myself to breathe out a long, long breath like blowing out the candles on a birthday cake. Again. And again. Long, slow breaths out until the pain diminished ever so slightly. True, but enough for me to remember that I am spacious. Yes, I am made of atoms, which are mostly space. And the volcanic rocks of the river pool where I am sitting are made of atoms, which are mostly space. And my space is passing through the space of the rocks. There is no impact. I have not just fallen and smashed myself. There is just space. The space of the atoms passing through the space of the atoms. Alex sat on one side of me, and Eaglesong sat on the other, holding and supporting me for what seemed like eternity. They later said it was probably about 5 minutes. Their calmness was a balm to the panic that was rising up and trying to grab me. My glasses are gone. At my words, they began to search the pool. Somehow their absence allowed me to roll onto my belly and then elbow and knee myself across the rocks until I could rise up to a squat. They're gone, and there's no point in searching for them, I heard myself say. And so they immediately came back to me, and clinging to them and a rock, I was able to come to my feet and my shaky knees. With help and frequent stops, we finished the last quarter mile of the walk back to the car, where the women of the retreat were waiting for us, unsure of how or if our adventure was going to continue. At top speed, we went, no, not to an emergency room, but back home for first aid, removal of my wet clothes and rolling me into dry ones, and then application of arnica gel to prevent and moderate any swelling and bruising, and a glass of nourishing herbal infusion, 7 drops of skullcap to cut the pain, and all of that done with me laying flat on my back with my injured arm held out to the side. I thought if I got it as far away from me as possible, it would maybe hurt less. Rice! No, not brown rice. Rest, ice, compress, and elevate. Rice. All traumatic injuries I couldn't stand. I was still dizzy, so rest, that part was pretty easy. Ice. Ice was too hard and too edgy on my wrist. Could not tolerate it. So a kitchen towel was soaked in ice water and applied. As a matter of fact, one of the women there from the Czech Republic dipped a towel in vinegar and wrapped that around my wrist to cool it. Very, very cooling. An ace bandage was at hand for the compression and elevation. Elevation seemed risky, and it increased my pain. But then again, having people pull on my fingers felt absolutely great. So maybe what I needed was traction and not compression at that point. It was time for class. Yes, it was time to talk about minerals. Well, I told the women, my wrist is clearly injured, but my mind and my mouth work just fine. If you are willing to accept teaching from a prostate teacher, I am happy to teach you. And so I did, lying at the feet of my students. I taught them. Part 2. I'm telling you what happened when I fell and hurt my wrist in Costa Rica. And I'm telling you about the many interesting ways that we work to ease my pain and heal that trauma. I'm also telling you about the steps of healing that we are using. We began, as always, with Serenity Medicine. Step 0, do nothing. We assessed the situation and saw that it was not life-threatening and took the time we needed to find our calm centers. I focused on breathing out. Alex and Eagle Song attended me quietly. They did not ask me questions. They did not voice fears that may have been in their minds. Breathing out calms the vagus nerve, diminishing pain and limiting swelling in traumatic injuries. We continued to assess the situation. I remained conscious. That was good. I could ambulate even better. I was moaning, ooh, but not crying or screaming. My frightened, curious child wanted and still wants to know, what's happened? Did I break any bones? Is there nerve damage? The nearest X-ray facility was 10 hours away. So between fear and curiosity, the insistent demands of story medicine, step 1, collect information, would simply have to wait. I heal quickly and well. These words came into my mind even as I was sitting in the river looking at my swollen wrist. I heal quickly and well, I heard myself saying, and I said it out loud. To Alex and to Eagle Song, I heal quickly and well. My body has a map of its own perfection. It recreates and heals itself perfectly. It's an affirmation from a book, and it works very well, but I heal quickly and well, to me, is simpler, fewer words. It's what I wanted and needed to say to myself. Affirmations are story medicine, for they tell a story, but I also think of them as mind medicine. Step 2, engage the energy. The homeopathic arnica gel that we applied and continued to apply to my unbroken but swollen and bruised wrist is also step 2. And so the beautiful well wishes for my healing that I received from all of the women there. I found in my travel bag personal safety, a mountain and tree remedy made from dew, and I rubbed a tiny bit on my skin and swallowed a tiny bit more. And then, just yesterday, a kind young woman offered me Arnica 200X, which she happened to have with her, and I joyfully swallowed down a tiny amount of that homeopathic remedy. Step 2, all of those things are step 2. Mind medicine. It's as wide as the human imagination. It's the shaman's playground. The spaciousness exercise, which I talked about last week, is mind medicine. From the first moment, my other hand held and cradled my hurt wrist, suffusing it with healing energy. Call it whatever you want, and its names are many. There is an energy that is emitted by the human hand, which can greatly reduce pain and hasten healing. I will continue to engage this aspect of energy medicine toward healing my wrist for as long as it takes. And I'm writing this just a few weeks after this happened. Step 3, lifestyle medicine, nourish and tonify. And then, of course, after that, we have alternative medicine, step 4. I found no need to use steps 5 and steps 6, pharmaceutical medicine or high-tech medicine, They are, of course, usually my last resort. As is frequently the case of an accident, there was no time to nourish or tonify anything that was happening right then. In fact, one must rely on the ground that has been built by nourishing and tonification, by one's lifestyle choices, so that when that trauma comes, the basis of health has already been there. My daily use of yogurt, cooked greens, and nourishing herbal infusions, as well as my commitment to walking, yoga, tai chi, and resistance exercises built strong bones that resist fracture and heal rapidly and well. So step 3 has to step aside, but don't worry, she'll return. And step 4 enters at haste, stimulate, and sedate, especially sedate, just what we need when dealing with trauma. Skullcap tincture, made from 100-proof vodka and fresh flowering skullcap plant, was my ally to relieve the pain. Small doses of 5 to 8 drops sedate the pain without sedating me. I've judged my healing by the hours I can go between doses. The first night, I woke up every 2 hours and needed some. By the second day, every 4 hours. And now, 12 days later, I'm down to once or twice a day. I didn't write about it, but I do want to add to this conversation that we're having, even though I'm reading, that I did indeed also use some high CBD cannabis tincture, and that I alternated the skullcap and the cannabis when I was writing this. Legal issues were such that it was deemed probably better for me to not say this, but things are a little clearer now, and I think that, especially over a radio show, that it's important to say that high CBD tinctures are also incredibly useful as painkillers. Certainly before they were available, skullcap would have been all that I would have used. Alex offered to poultice my wrist with a Costa Rican plant that his mother used when he hurt himself. Well, that's actually step 4, so let's get to that now. It grows by the river, Alex said, thumbing through his iPhone. He pulled up a picture and the botanical name, Anthurium salvini. Now, remember that salvia means savior or saving or, by extension, healing. So Salvini, hey, already we're looking good. This is botanically a healing plant. Tomorrow I will go and get a leaf and I will poultice you at night, he says. Meanwhile, the dance of the compresses, step 4, was in full swing. Our crone from Slovakia dipped more towels in vinegar and bound my arm with an old ace bandage around those towels. A plastic bag contained the vinegar fumes and protected surfaces and clothes from the drips. As soon as the comfrey leaf infusion was ready, I began to drink it. Some went into the freezer to get deeply chilled, and an hour later, before, of course, it was frozen, my arm and wrist was soaked in that cold comfrey infusion. We tossed the spent comfrey leaves in ice water and used that as a soak, and we also soaked kitchen towels in comfrey infusion, froze them, and then used them as cold compresses, ace bandage, plastic bag, and all. Wow, for pain remediation. Did I mention that it hurt like nothing I ever remember feeling? In addition to the drops of fresh flowering skullcap tincture as needed, I indulged in one of my favorite forms of meditation, pain relief, doing a picture puzzle. I finished it the last night of our wellness adventure with a little help from my friends. By the next afternoon, about 24 hours after the initial trauma, I was ready to lead our first weed walk in Costa Rica with a smile. It was a nearsighted smile. I lost my glasses, remember? I used them for seeing far. But it's okay. I don't need them to read, and people can point out to me what is far away from me. After dinner, Alex appeared, holding out for my inspection a large, and I mean large, leaf. This leaf was well over a yard or a meter long. You know, Costa Rica, large leaf plants, they really mean large. A knife, some oil, a frying pan, and this leaf is all we need. Come, let's poultice your arm, he said. He got the frying pan, and he put the oil in it, and he got that oil so hot that water popped when he dropped it in there. Then he cut sections of the leaf about the width of my swollen wrist and dropped them one at a time into the hot oil and applied them pretty hot directly to my skin. One section on the front, one on the back, and one wrapping around, and then all held in place and covered by that ever so useful ace bandage. Thank goodness we had that ace bandage to keep all of these poultices safe and sound. My mother would use a bandana instead, Alex muttered. Keep it on all night. Important, were his parting words, and I did, though it itched a little. I turned off the light, stretched my arm out, propped it up in a pillow, lay down, and slept, awakening only to take a little skull cap and tea. In the morning, it was amazing. When the poultice was removed, the area untouched by the leaf, my fingers and mid-hand, were twice as swollen as those that had been covered by the poultice. Well, more tonight, Alex said with a genuine smile. Now, I haven't mentioned so far that I'm at my daughter's home in Costa Rica, and she has left to visit my sister's daughter, her cousin, and the one thing she has said to Alex before she left was, don't take Susan to the Montezuma Falls. And of course, the very thing that Alex did was to take me to the Montezuma Falls, and that is where I fell and hurt my wrist. So he is poulticing it, not just out of wonderful, compassionate fellow feeling, which he certainly has, but also because he is feeling slightly chagrined and a bit embarrassed and guilty that he took me to the place where he was told not to take me, and I hurt myself there. Step 4 continued through all the following days. We chilled my arm for 20 to 30 minutes at a time, the ways that we were talking about, with cold compresses, with frozen compresses, and then compressed and poulticed my wrist and arm continuously, all day, at night. It was Alex and the Anthurium salvini. The second night, he did just like he did the first, but bigger pieces of leaf, and more of them. Did I only imagine that they were hotter? Oh, whoa! Keep it on all night. Important, Alex said and left. I did. Though it itched, my arms stretched out, propped up, lights off, awakening only to take a little skull cap and pee. The third night, Alex fried up the anthurium leaves. He put them on my wrist. He wrapped them with the ace bandage. Oh, it was hot. Oh, there were more leaves. Oh, it was itchier. All night. Important, he said as he left. I did it. Oh, but it was hard. Oh, my goodness, the fourth night. Yes, the fourth night he came. A fourth night, he dropped those pieces of leaves into that hot oil. He pulled them burning hot out of the oil. He put them on my arm. I couldn't bear it. It was too hot. He cooled them a little bit. He put them on my arm, more of them, and wrapped the ace bandage around. And when he left, he said, all right, important. But as soon as he got out the door, I tore it off. Within minutes of his departure, I unwrapped that ace bandage to relieve the fierce burning and the itching from the poultice. I thought, maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't cook it as much as before, and it was, maybe there's leaf veins there, and I could remove them, but with only my left hand and no sharp tool, I failed at doing much more than making a leafy mess, which I valiantly tried to replace on my arm and wrap up, only to have to remove it 5 minutes later as the skin irritation was just too much to be endured. Next morning, when I saw Alex, I had to admit, failure. I could not keep the poultice on. Ah, he said, smiling. So that is why my mother only did it 3 nights in a row. Yes, indeed. When we're using folk remedies, it is important to ask how often to do it. This is folk medicine becoming herbal medicine. This is herbal medicine as people's medicine, the medicine that grows outside your door, This is herbal medicine as story medicine, weaving us back into wholeness. The plants are aware of our interest and our desire to use them. They talk to one another. They come to our dreams. The old ones bend an ear. They respect our self-sufficiency. Everything works. I do not ask about a remedy that someone suggests. Will it work or does it work? Because the answer is always yes. To counter swelling and pain in a traumatic injury, the vinegar worked, the comfrey worked, the arnica worked, and the plant that I had never heard of before worked. Everything works. Instead of asking, does it work, I ask, does it make the family as well as the person healthier? Does it make the community as well as the family healthier? Does it keep the ecology healthy too? In the case of the healing leaf of Costa Rica, Anthurium salvini, all the answers are yes, indeed. Back home in the Catskills, the correct answer would be comfrey, which I grow, and vinegar, which I make. And even though we were using those in Costa Rica, they weren't the ones that were the real story medicine there. All the other remedies we used take one out of the home, out of the family, to the store, to the global marketplace to procure them. They work. They heal. But their scope is limited because they are items of commerce. They are loose threads, come undone from the healing cloak of the ancients, and so they cannot weave us back into wholeness. This is the true beating heart of herbal medicine, the earth, the plants, the community, the family, the person becoming more whole, more wholly healthier at every opportunity. Every injury is an opening to greater wholeness. Let's continue the story of my traumatized wrist, but let's return to story medicine. The second step of healing is story medicine. Story medicine is diagnosis. It is the answer to why, the answer to what. It is the stories we tell ourselves when we are injured or ill. For most people with access to high-tech medicine, the desire to know why and what sweeps the patient immediately into the last river of healing, the most dangerous river. My injured wrist looked ugly and distorted, and part of me wanted to know just what had happened. Was it broken? Was it dislocated? Was it sprained? I knew that what we did immediately to counter the trauma was more important than answering those questions, so we applied immediate first aid measures as outlined in the previous parts of this series. After teaching my class on minerals, and while continuing to rest, ice, elevate, and compress my wrist, I called Alex, our Tico friend, over and told him that if he would take me, I would go for an X-ray if one was available. At that point, I figured that waiting in an emergency room for hours wouldn't slow down my healing. In fact, from now on, I realized it was just going to be a matter of being patient while my wrist healed. As it turned out, the nearest X-ray facility was about 11 hours away, and my curiosity just wasn't that strong, so we wound up not going. I was hesitant. Was I doing all I could to help myself? Perhaps I was being foolish and needed that high-tech help. Instead of an X-ray to tell me what to do, I asked for stories. I asked if there was anyone there who had stories of a sprained or broken wrist. And here are two stories that were right there in our circle. They weren't 10 hours away. They were right next to me. A healthy white woman in her 30s told us, I fell while hiking and was carried out to the emergency room. X-rays revealed a broken wrist. I received the best modern orthopedic surgery. My wrist was set, screwed, pinned, wired, and immobilized. She detailed the horror and pain upon the removal of the pins and the months of physical therapy, and she showed us her wrist, which could bend in only one direction, forward and not back at all. Broken ankle. My son, a healthy white teenage boy, fell while rollerblading and waited in the emergency room for several hours. When they x-rayed him, they told him that the bones were not only broken but out of place, but the swelling is too severe, so we can't put your ankle back together again now. Go home, rest it, come back in 2 weeks when the swelling has subsided, and then we'll operate. Well, he did go home, and he did rest it, but he also allied with comfrey. He drank comfrey infusion. He used the spent plant material as a poultice, and he soaked his ankle in comfrey infusion. 2 weeks later, he went back for the surgery. When he was in the recovery room, the surgeon came in and smiled. Never seen anything like it, he admitted. When we opened you up, all the bones in your ankle were right back in place, just like they were supposed to be, and the fracture was healing exceptionally well. We did put a screw in. We didn't want you to think we'd cut you open for nothing, you know. Thank you for sharing your son's story, I said with real appreciation. Now I knew for certain that I could heal my trauma better than modern medicine could, without x-rays, without surgery. We live by stories. Stories tell us what we can do and how we can do it. When we change our stories, we change our lives. The next time you're hurt or ill, ask for stories from the people around you and see what the universe has in store for you. I have never been disappointed. Story medicine is central to the wise woman tradition, which heals by nourishing, because story is a kind of nourishment. As with everything we use for nourishment, there are junk foods in story medicine too. Blame, shame, and guilt are the junk foods of story medicine. Unfortunately, many of us were raised on junk foods fed to us by parents, teachers, religious figures, and even our friends. We have internalized those voices, and we now heap shame and blame and guilt on ourselves, especially when we're in an accident or get sick. The predominant story about health in our culture is that you're never supposed to get sick or injured. If you do, something is wrong with you, shame and guilt, or you're the victim of someone else's bad intentions, blame. These ideas have deep historical roots and lots of modern offshoots. The heroic tradition is especially fond of blame, shame, and guilt. If you're sick, you did something to cause it. If you're injured, there's a lesson to be learned, or so the heroic tradition would have us believe. I asked my mentor, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, why people blame themselves for their accidents, their cancer, their terminal diagnosis. Because guilt is preferable to chaos, she replied with a sad smile. The world we inhabit is fundamentally chaotic. Bad things just happen. We aren't really in control. When Eagle Song pulled me up out of the river, I didn't blame myself, the rock, the water, or anyone or anything. Blame looked backwards to a time that we cannot change. Affirmation takes us into the future, into a time that we can change. I heal rapidly and well is an affirmation, and it takes the place of blame and shame and guilt. Affirmations help us avoid looking for the reason that we are hurt. Affirmations short-circuit our desire to blame. Affirmations lead the way to a new story. My body heals rapidly and well. And it does. It's been 8 weeks now since the injury, and most of the swelling has receded. I'd say 99%. I've stopped using ice packs, so I wrap my wrist with a comfrey poultice once or twice a week and apply arnica oil or St. John's wort oil or even comfrey root ointment in the morning and the evening. I'm able to bring in firewood, though mostly left-handed, and I can hold 2 pounds unassisted in my injured hand and finally type with 2 hands. I can't milk with the injured wrist yet, though. I'm asking everyone for a story that relates to my story, and I am telling you my story. I am asking for stories to calm my fears. Like all of us, the fear part of my brain pops up at odd moments and insists that I cannot take care of myself, that I am foolish and unwise. The fear part of my brain needs to hear from experts. Every day, my hand and wrist are getting healthier and more flexible. So I ask a massage therapist who focused on sports injury, and she says I have a 3rd-degree ligamentous sprain and that kind of injury will take months to heal completely. Okay, it's only week 10, not even 3 months yet. No worries, Susan. My body heals rapidly and well. All right, rapidly is not at internet speed, but body speed. Then I ask Aviva Ram, MD, herbalist, midwife, mother of 3, and good friend, and she says that the worst thing that could happen is circulation could be impaired. And I reassured her that while that seemed to be true for the first weeks, my right hand seems paler than the left hand. Full blood flow returned once I got the swelling controlled, and my injured hand and wrist are now a healthy pink. In fact, my right hand is a little ruddier than the left because I am massaging it. Your body has a miraculous ability to heal itself, Aviva affirmed for me. Telling the story is just as important as listening to story. Telling the story is part of healing. We began with serenity medicine, and we move through the medicines or rivers slowly or quickly as our situation demands. So long as we are using serenity medicine, story medicine, mind medicine, and lifestyle medicine, we stay within the rivers that build health. But if we cross the Great Divide and engage the last three medicines, alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and high-tech medicine, then we must go back through the medicines in order to be fully healed, whole, and well. This is one woman's story of using the 7 medicines to heal a traumatic injury. And we'll be back next week to look at how one woman used the 7 medicines when she chose elective surgery to deal with her gallbladder. Great blessings and good night.
Thank you, Susan, for your incredible story of healing. And this concludes part 98 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Wade at Time Monk Radio.